Many of you are familiar with the work of Father Gregory Boyle, who runs Homeboy Ministries in Los Angeles. I quoted him recently as saying, "Our choice is always the same, to save the world or to savor it. And I vote for savoring it. And just because everything is about something else, if you savor the world, somehow, go figure, it's getting saved." Savoring the world. I guess in a way to prepare for this sermon, to savor the world, I went for a hike on Friday at Purisima, which is off Skyline. It's a rigorous hike, but more than rigorous, it's absolutely enchanting. No matter how many times I've hiked it, it still takes my breath away. Whether it's the dew on the spider webs that are so intricate, or the bright green on the darker green on the trees that are just beginning to grow, whether it's the little tuft of rabbit fur, hopefully not a leftover snack, or whether it's the grove of redwood trees that cool one on a hot day only to open up then to a vast vista of the blue waters of the Pacific. Savoring. I would tell you, though, that as we started, we were an hour into it. And finally, Anley shouted ahead to me, because I was on a mission, "Are you stopping to notice anything?" And that stopped me. It took me a whole hour just to unwind so I could be present. This beautiful world that we have. And when I stopped long enough, I was astonished by the beauty. Today, I want to invite us to more deeply savor the world. And I want to give full credit to some of the thoughts today, to Kathleen Dean Moore, who's written a book called Great Tide Rising, Towards Moral Clarity and Courage in a Time of Planetary Change. It is a beautiful book that has opened my heart deeply. And she says that if we're going to talk about global warming, if we're going to talk about climate change, it needs to be a conversation that we have with our head and our heart. A conversation with reason and emotions, with clarity and courage, because it's going to take all our capacities to make a change, to make a shift. But I don't want to focus on the crisis of climate change, though that would be easy to do, wouldn't it? I don't want to give apocalyptic statistics. We know them all too well. And sometimes I wonder just how much that moves us forward. But because we're about faith and spirituality, spirituality is a different way of seeing, so I want to frame how we think about our world today. I want to converse with you about the power of moral affirmation. So much of the time we focus on moral obligation. I want to talk about moral affirmation. To affirm that which we believe is good and right and just and beautiful, and to align ourselves with those values. To ask ourselves, what do we care about too much to lose? Moore writes a chapter early on. I love the title of it, Why It's Wrong to Wreck the World. She gives 13 reasons, but I just want to highlight 3 that she and I find compelling. So why is it wrong to wreck the world? Well, first of all, number 1, because the world is wonderful. I know you out there. I know your stories. I know what matters to you. And I know that you tell me that where you most experience the sacred is where? Consistently. That's what you say. Why? Because we recognize the deep sacredness, The ancients said it this way: when God saw all that God had created, God said, "It is good. It is very good." But Moore says, but say there is no creator, that life created itself in great bursts of variation and selection, filled the sky with midges and birds, and filled the sea with not just fishes, but the most extraordinary collection of creatures too various to be imagined. If this is so, then this world is astonishing, irreplaceable, essential, beautiful, and fearsome, generative, and beyond human understanding. If the good English word for this combination of characteristics is sacred, then that is the word I will use. We are born into a sacred world, and we ourselves are part of its glory. When we fail to honor and protect the sacredness of this world, what we fail to do is a failure of reverence. Reverence, that radical amazement, that respect that recognizes and honors the presence of the sacred, our bodies, other people. It's that willingness to be amazed. It's that willingness to say, wow. It's that rejection of being jaded. The great Rabbi Abraham Heschel says, reverence is a specific attitude towards something that is precious and valuable. It is, he says, a salute of the soul. I think sometimes we see our world as so utilitarian. In fact, Immanuel Kant says, there's ways to look at it. There's things with instrumental value and things with intrinsic value. Instrumental value, value as a means to an end, like a tool. Intrinsic value, value in and of itself. For too long throughout Christian history, I think we've looked at the world with instrumental value rather than intrinsic value. Reverence for the world because the world is wonderful. Anybody agree with that? The second reason is because we love the children. If we fail to prevent the ruin of the life support systems of the planet, if we strip the planet of its green and growing beauty, we will have betrayed our love for our children. It's the last thing I want to do, is betray my love for our children. The children did not create this danger. It's wrong to wreck the world because we love the children. You know, the scriptures say the sins of the fathers and mothers are, anybody know? Visited on the third and fourth generation. I always used to think that was such harsh judgment. But then when I realized, no, it's merely descriptive. It is merely descriptive. The things that we do in our lifetime have effect to the third and fourth generation. Scriptures also say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and set their children's teeth on edge. Again, descriptive. What do we want for our children? If you have children, what do you want for your children? I want to love my child. I want to keep her safe. I want to protect her. Same with all the children. Why? Because we grant them a kind of moral worth because they hold promise, but even more so, they do not deserve to suffer because they didn't create the problem. I want you to remember this congregation's moral outrage about children separated from families at the border. and it continues to happen. The moral outrage that I found just rise up among you. And why? Because I imagine there's as many different views on immigration in this room as there are people. But all of you said, it is not okay to hurt the children. Caring for our children leads us to care for all the children. In her book, Moore says, after a talk, a tall man came up to me. She said he was so tall she hardly even saw his face. She just kept looking at the third button on his shirt, which, let me just say, I could totally relate to. And he said, I love my daughter more than anything else in the world, and all I want for her is to be safe and happy. So I am going to amass as much money as I can to provide for her, and I don't care how I get it. Is that so wrong? You know, particularly here in this Bay Area, Silicon Valley culture, even as we try to provide and help our children, sometimes the decisions that we make actually harm their futures, stealing from them a world as rich and delightful as the world we were born to. She says it's a tragic irony that the amassing of material wealth we do in our children's futures hurts them most of all. And then, of course, what it does to children of less privilege. We love the children, and if we do, what are we really teaching them? Very recently, researchers at Harvard asked middle school and high school students, 10,000 of them was the sampling. They asked these students, these kids, these youth, asked if their parents cared more about their grades and achievement or them being kind. Do you want to hear the results? No. It was honest, at least. 80% said grades and achievement. What do we want most for our children? I want my child to be kind, to live in harmony with the green earth and with the people on it. So why is it wrong to wreck the world? Because the world is wonderful, because we love the children, and thirdly, because we care about human rights and justice. A lot of people around the world would agree with the moral principle, or at least the ideal to which we aspire, that human rights, that all people have a right to life, liberty, and security of person. And I think one of the things that was so eye-opening to me from the book this week was that if there's anything that threatens a more massive violation of human rights than anything else, it is global warming and climate change. Violation at an amazing scale. I don't know that I ever thought of it in that exact way. Human rights depends to a large extent on a healthy environment. And we care about justice. Equality versus equity is a really good question to ask when it comes to justice. And maybe some of you have seen this poster. So this is equality. Okay, so you have 3 young people here, and they're each trying to see the baseball game. One is short, one is of medium height, and one is very tall. So equality means that we put them all on a box, right? But as you might notice, nothing really changed. That's how some people think of equality. We just give everybody the same thing. But equity is proportional equality. Being a short person, I can really relate to this. Proportional equality. It's like the cartoon. In the cartoon, there's a man sitting across from a very large desk, and there's a lineup of creatures, the big tree in the background. In front of the desk, facing him, is a monkey, a penguin, an elephant, fish in a bowl, a seal, and a dog. And the man says, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Harvard philosopher John Rawls thought of it this way: a practice is fair if it is a practice that people would unanimously choose if they were blind to how that practice would affect them particularly. In other words, how would you arrange the world, by what rules, if you did not know in advance if you were going to be lucky or unlucky, black or white, sick or strong, male or female, Bangladeshi or Canadian? Or to put it in more simple terms, at a birthday cake, you ask a child to cut the cake, but to give the first piece away to another child. Let another child choose their first piece. Never will you see a cake cut so precisely. We say we care about fairness. We care, I hope, about equity. And so our own carbon footprint, which is so greater in the United States than most of the world, we need to bear the heavier burden then of the changes that need to be made. Why is it wrong to wreck the world? Because we have a wonderful world. We love our children and we don't want to betray their love. And we care about human rights and justice. So let's begin where we started. What do you cherish so much? Can you, along with Billy Collins, the poet, said, this morning as I walk along the lake shore, I fell in love with the wren, the mouse, the seamstress in the window, the bowl of broth, the scent of lavender. Because blessed are those who savor the world and thereby save the world. And blessed are those who protect the earth. Blessed are those who love the children. Rejoice and be glad, for then earth and people will be one. Amen.